Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me comic creator Frank Martin. So, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I am very excited to do this interview because I actually really like your comic. I like what's out there, and obviously, I love crime and noir stories.
I love crime. I love crime in general. When crime rates skyrocket, I get happy.
Exactly. I always love a good murder, right? Who doesn't? Anyhow, you're in the middle of a Kickstarter for your book called The Last Homicide, issue 1 of a 2-issue series. And I think that is the best place to start with what's going on with this story and what is the basic premise.
So the basic premise is it takes place in a city that's filled with corruption. Gangs run the city, the mob, and we have these two detectives. One's got his foot out the door; he's about to retire, and the other's a younger, snarky detective. And the title, "The Last Homicide," comes from this is their last homicide working together before the older detective retires. And their last homicide case is the murder of a mob boss's son. And everybody is afraid that this is going to be the triggering event that has these two rival mob bosses start an all-out gang war in the city. So their last homicide, the stakes are pretty high in that they have to solve the murder before this gang war happens.
And this is why I like your story, because we take a very basic concept, in my view, where we have a detective who's hanging up, kind of, it's like one last job for him to get out, but then we add an entire mob boss crime war, legitimately hanging on by a thread. And we're going to get into that in a second, but where did this idea come from? Because we've seen the basic components of this, but we've never seen the entire machine of this entire circumstance put together. And I could reference a bunch of different comic books. You know, I don't know if you've read Batman War Games and War Drum.
Yes, War Game was crazy because it was like one storyline that was spread throughout like 20 different titles, and it was like a 17-part thing. Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool, and they hooked you because the very first issue was like 99 cents. I remember it being.
And this is the entire concept where a gang war breaks out, and this is what drew me into your story. And so where did this entire concept of The Last Homicide come from?
So, I mean, storytelling to me is just basically taking your favorite things from different properties and just cutting out different parts of it and then pasting them together and making something original. So, especially with a genre that's so popular and has been done so much, like crime noir, detective stories, you can, for instance, the relationship between the two policemen is pretty much straight out of like something like Seven. You know, you got Morgan Freeman, who's the older detective who's about to retire, and you got Brad Pitt, who's the younger guy. And Morgan Freeman is a little more educated, a little more cynical about what's going on. And Brad Pitt's like, no, I'm going to save the day, baby. That's how it's all about. So, and so I just wanted to do something like that, where I took different parts of stories that I like: crime families, female mob boss, rival gang wars, and corrupt city, and I just kind of threw them in a blender and I swirled it all around, and this is what my brain came up with.
And it's funny that you mentioned Seven. I don't know if you know who did the comic book of Seven.
I don't.
Zenescope, and I'm a big Zenescope fan, and I have interviewed Ralph Tedesco from Zenescope. Super interesting you mentioned that.
I didn't even realize there was a Seven comic. What is it? Just an adaptation of the movie, or is it something?
Yeah. They sort of adaptationed out the movie, and it ties into the movie. It's super interesting, but I digress because it's not about Zenescope; it's about you. So, having said all that, obviously,
I would love to go on a Seven tangent. I have no problem.
So obviously, there's a lot of stuff happening in The Last Homicide, and I think, you know, obviously the story and what premises it and what sets it up is that we have a mob boss's son gets killed in his apartment. It's a clean kill. It's not an angry girlfriend. It's not a fight. It's not a smashing. Obviously, you know, there's no sci-fi where he didn't fake his death. Obviously, this is a hit.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way to put it.
I always have to preface the fact that you said he was in his apartment, he could have girlfriends. This is an adult son. I just didn't like kill some 8-year-old to start the story. I think that would have been a bad look to get off the ground. So yeah, it is a grown-up son. And yeah, that's the first scene of the book. The first scene of the book is them at the crime scene, witnessing the dead body, kind of throwing ideas back and forth, seeing how this could have possibly gone down.
And so one of the things that I like about this is that the son seems clean, meaning he doesn't seem like he's in the mob. He doesn't seem like he's got a mob connection. And so what premised you to create this as the catalyst of the story? Because this sets the tone of the entire story moving forward. And I think it's super important to really get into this, because this is what really says, hey, this is how the story's going. Yeah. Because you could have made a different hit. You could have made it a hit on a Don. You could have made it a hit on a lieutenant. I don't know if you've seen the anime 91 Days, but 91 Days is all about revenge on the mob and the guys climbing through essentially lieutenants to get to the big cheese. Mm-hmm. It's not climbing through civilians. Yeah. And so climbing through almost a civilian of the son of a mob boss, and we don't know who did it exactly yet.
So when they go to question the rival mob boss, the one whose son wasn't killed, he says flat out, he denies it, of course. And he even says, of course I'm going to deny it. Why would I'm not going to admit to killing him, even if I did kill him. But he points out that the son is a civilian, and and even these mobsters who are completely corrupt and ruthless have a little bit of a code here where they're not going to take it out on a civilian. So I wanted to have him be the catalyst, because it really shows seeds of doubt, about what's going on. There's a lot more plausibility if it was like an enforcer or a lieutenant or somebody tied to the organization. Here's somebody totally separate. He still has familial connections. His mother is the mob boss, but he's outside of it. So it really, there's a big shadow of doubt going on as far as what the big story or I should say the agenda at play is.
And even going further off this, because we also get this mother-son connection where it does add a level of human to it, where it's a woman losing her son while she's ruthless, and we get a cool scenario where we get a ruthless woman in power who clearly has buried other people before. Yeah. So the fact that her son gets killed, she's upset about it. And she also lost her son. It adds a little bit of more of a human touch to it, but we also still get that ruthlessness, and we also get this idea that, she must have done something to be the mob boss. Yeah. She must have done some dirty work to be the mob boss, to take over the family. And so what is that like? Because we get two issues and two sides to all of this going on. And so that's something that is super interesting in its own right. And even building that out and getting both those things in there, because it does make this story hit a little bit closer to home.
She's my favorite character in the book, because she has this duality going on within her. And there's two opposing forces, but she's so comfortable with both of them. She's this ruthless mob boss that mouths off at the cops that have no business yelling at people when they get the wrong flowers for the funeral. But she's a loving mother who cares deeply about her son, and her son is dead, and she has to grieve for him. But she's not going to grieve for him like a normal person would. She's going to grieve for him like a mob boss would. And we only see her for one scene in this book in part 1. But she's definitely my favorite character because of that, because she's so ruthless, but she's coming at this from a mother's love that just lost her boy.
And then her counterpart is Don Franco. Yeah. And he is also very comfortable, and the police show up, and then he sort of has a new guard stating, and that the new guard is questioning the cops, but he's also very open in defying the police and inviting them right into his favorite restaurant, because they live in this lawless, corrupt city. And so it's kind of a crazy thing, but he also flat out says, I didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of inclined to believe he didn't do it, because my understanding is that people who are in the mob will openly say, I didn't kill that person. There's this code that they'll deny if they whack the guy, but they won't if they say they didn't murder somebody. Chances are, when questioned by the police, that's kind of what's going on. And so what is that like? And also he says something very interesting where he says, if she wants a war, I'm going to give her one and I'm going to finish it. To that effect as well, where it's clear that he doesn't want this war, but he'll finish the war if necessary.
Yeah, that was another reason why it was a good. I enjoyed killing off somebody that was outside of the organization, outside of this world, because it sets the stakes that much higher. You know, he fully knows what's going to happen if she thinks that he's the killer. You know, she's going to go to start a gang war, and he really doesn't want that. So he understands what's at stake. So when he says to the cops, I didn't do it, you want to believe him. And I had a blast both writing Don Franco and the female mob boss, whose name is Kitty. I had so much fun writing their dialogue, because they're just not like, they don't need to be physically ruthless, but they need to be verbally ruthless. You know, they choose their words very carefully. So having them talk back and forth with the cops and picking their words and kind of dancing around the subject without really there's a lot of subtext to what they say. So yeah, the writing for the mob bosses those were two great scenes when they interact with the police.
And then talking about the police, because we already sort of mentioned it, but we have Detective Wilmer, who is a hard-nosed, jaded, roughed-up detective who clearly has been on the job way too long, probably needs a therapist. Let's be realistic. He needs a therapist. He probably needs like a psychiatrist at best. He probably needs like a hug. Yeah. Just to give an example here, on his last day, they give him cake, and he's like, nah, it's too much for me. And then another officer, to some degree, says, if you've been on this job for as long as you have been, a piece of cake isn't going to kill you, and he has no interest in the cake. This is the type of cop we're dealing with. So what was that like, where we have this jaded cop? We have this cop who's been roughed up, who is extremely cynical and understands how everything works, per se, and also says, hey, I got to kind of finish this because it's just my obligation. When technically he could probably at 12 midnight that night close the door and not look back, and it's not his problem anymore. Technically.
Yeah, there was a reason why we named it The Last Homicide, you know, because it really is at the center of the story that Wilmer, this is the last homicide case. And it's not just his last homicide case working it, it's his last homicide case working with his partner. So at the same time, we have this dual character arc where they're both on they're on the same track, but they're on different tracks. You know, Wilmer is going one direction where he's done, he's finished, he's through, he just wants to get the job done. And Gomez, who's the younger detective, he enjoys his job. You know, he understands Wilmer, but at the same time, he's determined, and he wants to. And he has a good time talking with mob bosses and running around trying to catch killers. So they're both going in different directions, but they're both going in different directions together as they try to solve this case. So there's a lot of character development going on throughout this entire story, and they all the different characters have different relationships with each other, which is really what makes this genre so awesome. Is that it's just about characters and relationships. And creating tension and drama between them.
And it's also this weird dichotomy to some degree where the way I read it, at the very least, and correct me if I'm wrong or add to it or challenge it, is that I feel that Wilmer was what Gomez is today. And that after surviving this fucked up city that probably has killed more cops than saved them, and probably Wilmer is the abnormality of getting his pension and getting out. And that probably when he first started out as a detective, he was excited. And it's this entire idea that if you're in this fuckery, for lack of a better word, it's going to make you into what Wilmer is. And he also understands, though, that if he doesn't solve this, a gang war is going to break out and that there's not going to be much of a city to return to at the same time. And also, I think he wants to kind of leave on a high, too, and get that last solving of that case. And so we get a lot of cool emotions and a lot of like obligation and duty and a sense of justice, per se, into figuring out all this crazy shit. And also we might get the fact that he might just want to do this because he kind of gets off on it to some degree too, which is something that a lot of this genre deals with. So there's so much to play with just their relationship and their motives. And what is that like for you, having legitimately a whole span of tools in your toolbox to pull out
of? No, as a writer, there's no greater honor than when somebody reads your work and they speculate for the characters beyond the pages. When you start thinking about what Wilmer was like 20, 30, 35, 40 years ago, that's cool to me. That's awesome to me. I mean, those are stuff that I don't like to address that. I don't really like to answer that because it's not in the story. Everybody, when they read it, everybody has the same stuff in their page, but everybody, as far as backstory or future or stuff that's going on outside of the story, is everybody's going to kind of interpret it or come up with their own ideas about it. So the fact that you're thinking about if Wilmer was like Gomez at the start of his career,
even going further, because obviously we get this sense that there's no way that Wilmer wasn't beat up after 30 years on this job. I think that's a natural assumption that the city has made him a hell of a lot more jaded. Mm-hmm. And I think he also understands, though, that he's in a city and he has rules now to play in his city, meaning that the politicians are bought off on both families. Mm-hmm. It's this idea that, when he retires, if there's not a war, he's going to be happy in retirement in his city. But if there's a war, pretty much it's crystal clear there's going to be blood in the streets and it's going to affect him. Yeah. And so, I just think that there's so much to play with. And even dropping the speculation, it must be a blast to know that you legitimately can go 10 different directions with this. And that you can build off of this. But also, you are limiting it to, I think, 60 to 80 pages, give or take, right?
It's going to be, less than that. I think it's 23, 24 pages, but in part 1 and part 2 are about that. So it's going to be 45 pages of story, probably, around there, 45, 46.
And so to even go off of that, what is that like? Because anybody can write long. I'm a strong believer that if you have 100 issues to tell a story, you can do it.
If you got 4.5 hours, 5 hours to make a movie, it's going to be a good movie.
But when you have 45 pages, one of the things I had a professor and he taught me to write short. So he writing short where you have 4 pages to write a memo briefing, and the theory was that you would have to hand it to your congressman right before he was questioning, and I used to sort of wanted to work for the government, and he's got 10 minutes to read it, and so 2 pages, to get the memo and start formulating questions, and maybe even you have an entire question page of 10 questions. So obviously, what is that like for you writing short? Because writing short is very different than writing long.
It's a very good skill, and it's also a useful and practical skill. I've written for a bunch of anthologies, and what editors for anthologies will tell you is that they always have room for a 2-page story, a 1-page story, 3-page stories. They could only take so many 6 to 8-page stories. So I've entered a lot of anthologies with 2-page stories, and you have to be able to cut out the bullshit. You got to get to the story, get to the heart of it, tell it, and then get done. And you got to do it in a satisfying way. And so I really strive, and the fact that I'm able to do that and I enjoy doing that. So as far as The Last Homicide goes, part one and part two are different animals. Part one is essentially a meet and greet. It's an introduction to the setting, the premise, the characters. And part two, it's like we're putting all the cards up, and then part two is when we push the cards over. And this mystery is going to start to unravel, and we're going to start to see the pieces fall into place as far as what the end of the case is.
Yeah, and we get sort of the, I guess, twist at the end of book one. I'm not going to exactly reveal it, but it seems to be somewhat of an inside job. I think it is a good way to put it. What happens at the end of book one that sort of sets up the twist and sets up who killed who, and we don't know the why, but we have an understanding that, well, this is closer than we think to home. I think is a good way to put it.
It's a message that there's more going on than what's on the surface. It's a message that it's not going to be an easy open and shut case as they were hoping to be, which was they kind of knew that going into it, but even more so now on the final page.
And so that's kind of, and I'm purposely being ambiguous because I think once you understand, if I was to drop it, it would sort of ruin, the entire first issue a little bit.
Yeah,
I think having a cynical cop, this is not going to be a happy ending. I think that's a pretty safe assumption.
Yeah, it's not going to be a happy ending.
Which is how it should be, because let's be realistic. This isn't Law and Order SVU, okay?
For their credit, I think they have equal measure happy and sad endings. I mean, that's one of the good things about it, is that crime is that because they're dealing with dark stories, and they're easy to catch you off guard because they have no problem taking a turn for the worst and going south real quick.
I would say I legitimately am 2/3 through the 21st season of Law and Order in the last 3 days. I would say it's about 70-30.
Okay.
There are 30% have bad endings, or sad endings. The other 70 have a happy, just ending.
Law and Order's SVU especially. It's one of those shows that I've never religiously watched. I never made an attempt to watch it, but yet when it's on, I always watch it. I never say, "Oh, it's 8:00. It's SVU time." But if it's Sunday at 2:00 and I turn on USA, I'm like, okay, I can watch some SVU.
I'm sorry. I'll quickly explain how I got into this. So it's a super good tangent because it's so relevant. So WrestleMania happened last weekend, and I picked up a Peacock account. And it's $10 for 4 months, so it's $250 for the next 4 months.
I've already seen where the story is going.
And so SVU is completely on Peacock, and so that's why I'm not watching all of it. Anyhow,
when you get these subscriptions and then they're gonna run out, you're like, I never want to leave the couch because I want to get my money's worth the entire time.
I'm probably gonna wind up keeping it anyway because I like watching wrestling and I'm a big WWE fan, so it's not an issue. It's just that I'm super excited because I'm now using my iPad almost every second of my life. It's wonderful. My point I'm trying to make here is that going off of this crime story is that we're not gonna get a happy ending. We're gonna get justice to some degree, and I have a feeling we're gonna unravel the mystery and a variety of other unpleasant social problems and problems that deal with shit like that, and perhaps deeper gang, police issues, brutality issues, and personal issues that are all thriving around the individuals involved, including Detective Wilmer, and what's aimed at him. And we're going to get sort of this idea, and what I think is him coping with the last job he's doing, because that's sort of in play too. And so this is going to be a very emotional issue too going forward.
Yeah, as talking to people, I've been pleasantly surprised by how invested they are in cracking this case. I never realized it when I wrote a mystery, how much people are going to be looking forward to seeing what the end result of the mystery is. But it's a little bit, it's exciting as a writer, but it's also a little bit daunting, because if you don't, mysteries are all about the landing. You know, if you don't stick the landing, it kind of, I don't know if it makes the whole journey worthwhile. So hopefully.
And also what adds to this, and I think we already mentioned, but I want to reiterate it, is that it's this concept of there's real stakes. It's not just a random murder we're trying to find. If this thing doesn't get solved within 24 to 48 hours, we're going to have a gang war, and it doesn't matter if it was a random stranger who just capped Billy, or if it was the rival gang, or if it was somebody within the gang, or it was an orchestrated external or internal hit. It's not going to matter once that war starts. And so it is very much a race against time. And there's real consequences to make sure that this doesn't happen. And that's what I think makes this even more interesting, is that the mystery has real consequences. You know, it's not just that some kid got murdered.
Yeah.
It's that there's real stakes that could lead to a lot more death.
Yeah. So one of my favorite crime graphic novels is Whiteout by Greg Rucka, and are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I know who Greg Rucka is. He's great.
Do you know Whiteout?
Mm-hmm.
So Whiteout is a murder mystery at the South Pole, and Volume 2, which I also like, but is not as popular. Volume 2 is a little bit of a race against time pressure cooker. It's more of a spy thriller kind of scenario. And what I try to do in Last Homicide, without even realizing it, is I kind of combine the two a little bit. You know, it's a murder mystery, but it's also a pressure cooker. You know, it's also a race against time. So they have to figure out who the killer is, and if they don't do it in a certain time frame, there are a whole bunch of ramifications for the city's politicians, for the gangs, for civilians, for the police department. So there's a lot on these two detectives' shoulders, one of whom who's got one foot out the door.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake, and it's going to be super, super interesting where this goes and how deep it goes as well. And so I don't want to push too much further into this, because obviously issue 1 is out there, or it's being Kickstarted right now. Are you fully funded?
I am not. I think I'm 70% with about 2 weeks, 13 days left.
So you're in good territory. I want to make that crystal clear that obviously, if you're listening, watching, and you like what we're talking about, you should obviously, before we get too far ahead and dive into some of these rewards, you should go back it. But you're in a good place for the 2 weeks left or 13 days left. Yeah. So obviously 30% isn't that big of a hurdle. You know, it's better than.
Also, the book is finished, because obviously you read it. So it's not like I have 5 pages done and I'm looking to finish the other one. This book is completely finished. I want to print it and ship it. So that's all I really need.
So I don't want to push too much on that, but I do want to talk about the rewards, because that's the other side of Kickstarter. And so obviously there's a lot of digital rewards here that can be done. So we get the issue 1 digital rewards. I think there's some other like digital reward package if I'm not.
So I have the basic digital reward is just the book. And then I have like a digital deluxe tier, which I have 2 short crime comics on my computer they've been sitting there. I haven't really published them, and I decided to offer them as like a bonus. So if you get the deluxe, you get some extra short black and white crime comics.
Yeah, and then obviously this is what you could get the physical one, and I threw it up there, and I didn't realize that it was transparent in the back, which is super cool. That's news to me. This is actually super dope. Not my intention, but I believe that this is the physical printed copy. The standard edition is $10.
Yes, and that's U.S. shipping is included in that.
And so obviously that's pretty good. So $10 with shipping, you get a physical copy. Then there's the variant.
Yeah, that's done by my friend Lou Cooper, who's a big noir guy.
So that's the variant. Then I believe there's also the Kickstarter black and white noir version. So what is this exactly?
So that's the standard cover, except it's got no dress on it. It has no logo, and it's got no colors. So I thought it looks awesome like that. I wanted to offer that as a Kickstarter exclusive. I'm not going to order any extra ones for cons or signings or my store. And yeah. Also, if you're wondering what this thing is, that's yeah. There we go. If you're wondering what that is, anything $15 or over, I'm including my friend Lane Thomas does a theme for every one of my comics that I put out. So it's going to be like a kind of a Great American Bandstand, kind of old school, golden age of Hollywood theme to go with the detective vibe of the book.
And so obviously even talking about that, so what is that like to do music? Because that's a new thing. And obviously music with books is interesting. Obviously a lot of people are adding cool content into that. I've seen people add, virtual reality and apps into stuff. I've seen QR codes being played into this. I've seen some interaction stuff that I'm still trying to figure out with other books. I've seen, people do entire soundtracks to read their comics in. And I've seen a variety of other cool stuff being done in this and adding, I guess, another media form into a comic book.
I think that's kind of rolls into the phenomenon of Kickstarter, and it's not just about making a book anymore. People are making an experience of launching the book, and they always try to push the envelope of what you can include as part of your campaign, as part of your launch, as part of the experience of the book coming out there. We got tons of memorabilia like stickers and buttons and pins, and then you got all other multimedia like soundtracks and VR and all sorts of crazy stuff, trading cards. So it really rounds out the experience of characters and the world, not just for my book, for everybody's book. And I've been blessed with an awesome friend that makes great music. He did a kind of a Twilight Zone theme for my 2 book campaigns ago. For the last one, he did a sci-fi theme. So he's very talented, and he's able to jump back and forth between different genres and really nail the atmosphere of these books that I'm putting out.
And then even going further off of this, because there is a bundle to get all 3 covers, and that is cheaper than buying them all individually, which is super helpful.
Yeah, so also Kickstarter's cool add-on feature that's a couple months old. All of these books are part of the add-on. So if you only want 2 of them, if you don't want to get the whole bundle, I just put a couple add-ons on there. The last book was Polar Paradox. The middle one is a horror novel that I've done. It's got a cool pulp cover, which I thought went with the book. And then I have a noir crossover book, Hollow Testament, which I did with Lou Cooper, who did the variant for Last Homicide. So, and I also have a sticker package, which is that thing all the way in the corner with kind of a forensic themed sticker bundle. So yeah, I'm trying to just throw in different things to kind of sweeten the pot for some backers.
And then obviously there's a bunch of other stuff that you're also offering. So obviously you're offering lesson stories on how to do like some short story stuff. Mm-hmm. You're also doing some commission stuff as a writer, which is cool, which is a new thing that's coming out now. For those who are unaware, a commission for the most part, and I think for most of in the last at least 20 years, has been a piece of art that's either done by contacting your favorite artist and seeing if they want to draw you a piece for $500 to $1,000 to $3,500. And I've seen $3,500 pieces. A lot of money for a piece of art. If you have the money, I am totally cool with that, and I get it. But at the same time, that's a lot of money. But now what I'm starting to see is a lot of writers in comics and in a lot of other areas say, hey, I'll write you a short story, and then you can do what you want with that story, or it could be whatever you want. So you're doing short story commissions. I think you're doing something with 100 words and something with 1,000 words.
So I offer a
Yeah.
Drabble lesson, which is the lesson you were talking about. That's a Drabble is exactly 100 words. So, like we were talking about, writing short stories is a good skill. I've written like hundreds of these 100-word stories, and I like to think I'm pretty good at it. That if somebody's interested in learning, I could do that. Reward was like a 45-minute Zoom lesson where I can kind of walk you through the process, tell you the tips and how to do it. And then I have, as you were saying, a short story commission tier, which is 1,000 words at least. And I really started this because I'm jealous of artists, that artists get to offer commissions, especially at cons when they just have their head down and they're drawing and people don't bother them. They're like, don't bother me. I'm working on a commission. I always wanted to just bring my typewriter and just like pound a story at the con table. But yeah, I did that in my first campaign back in 2018, and I put it every campaign since. And I always get at least 1 or 2 people who grab it, which is pretty cool, pretty awesome.
And so I just think it's interesting, and I think that commissions should go beyond just art. I mean, I get that people want an art commission, but I do think it is cool to throw that concept out there because I think that it is far and few spread in between.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool when people come with creative ways. And then you also do a combo of, I think, with some art and a digital art thing, or is it the Drabble and the lesson? I'm not exactly sure.
I offer the short story commission tier. Then I offer an art commission tier, which is Lou Cooper, who did the variant, is going to do a digital piece of art for you. And then I basically just smash those together where you can get a short story and the art, and I think it's at a little bit of a discount than if you were to get them separately.
And then also there's this position where you can become a character in the next issue, and that's been done by a lot of cool people in the comic world. And obviously, if you're an indie comic reader and you always want to be part of something, it's a super cool reward for a lot of people. So what is that like? And obviously, where's that going?
So there's only one available for this campaign, and this isn't going to be like a background character where you're just spotted in the crowd. This is an actual one of the main roles. He wasn't introduced in part 1, and so if you want to pick it up, it could be any race, any gender. It doesn't matter. We'll pop you in as this main character, this main speaking role. And we haven't the script for part 2 is completely finished, but we haven't done the art yet because we want to see if anybody wants to be part of the book. So,
and then another reward, I should say, is to produce a comic. Yeah. And so what is that entailing? Because obviously a lot of people want to do indie comics. Not everybody knows how to do it. I'm in the process of sort of trying to figure out what I want to write and draw and analyze and what direction I want to go into. And so what is this concept of produce a comic? What does that tier entail? Because it is sort of a entry point for somebody who says, hey, I want to do something in comics, but I don't know exactly how. Maybe I need a little help figuring out, and I need a little collaboration, even if it's not, my complete baby. I sort of need that first step / mentor / production credit under my belt.
So that is my big ticket item for the campaign. I do that kind of for every campaign. Nobody's picked me up on it yet, but I always offer it. It's basically a 5-page short with a cover. And if you can have an idea, you cannot have an idea, whatever kind of situation you're in as far as story goes, I'll work with you to develop the script. We'll use the Last Homicide art team to bring you in every step of the process as far as layouts and thumbnails, and then pencils, inks, and then eventually colors and letters. And yeah, you'll have a finished digital 5-page comic with a cover that you can do with what you want. If you want to get it printed, if you want to post it online, it's yours to do with as you wish.
And so, and I view this very much where somebody's going to sort of help you walk you through it. And if you're really into comics and you want to do your own thing and you are legitimately lost in figuring out how to do a bunch of stuff, well, this might be sort of that entry starting point, because a bunch of people are going to be helping you out figuring it out.
Yeah, I mean, comics is a very steep learning curve. You really don't realize it until you start to do it yourself. So, yeah, this is basically me and us walking you through the process so you have something to be proud of.
And so again, I'm going to say it again because I think it's super important. Where I don't know how much this tier goes for, but if you really want to do this, and you really want
$750.
So if you really want to do this and you want that help, and you don't really know what you're doing, and it's just something that you say, hey, I need to produce indie comics, this might be a way for you to do it. And it might help you figure it out, and then you also have something, and then I'll just throw something out there, and you might not like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you have a 5-page produced comic, and then an idea is fleshed out, built out, analyzed, and you go and take that concept to another artist, and then they have an idea, and you could just expand that story even further and figure it out, and it might give you even further clarification on where you want to go with your project, or even just the expansion of this product and project.
Yeah, people use 5 pages to pitch work all the time. And it could be part of a bigger story. You could say, I have a graphic novel of 60 pages. I only have 5 pages done, but you could get a good idea of the story. You could get a good idea of the art. You could also go the other way, where you say, I have a superhero world with 5 different titles. They all got 5 issues, but I only have a 5-page short finished. That could be a pitch.
Or the third way, which is television, movies.
Yes.
Where if all of a sudden you want to go a whole different route and you want to pitch an idea, and you say, hey, I got this new idea for a show, and I really don't want to do comics, but let me give and grant a concept, and this is my leg up. And this is going to give these people at, sci-fi, not to single out sci-fi here, but I want to give, I think they're a good fit for certain things, I want to give them a real idea what I'm looking for and what I'm trying to grant them, so that when I pitch them this show, they say, oh, we get it. Because a comic is a visual entity. And so now all of a sudden, if you have a sci-fi world and you're like, boom. So this is, if you are smart and you have a battle plan with this tier, you can use it in many different ways for both comics or television or movies or indie, web projects, or if you're just doing your own fan film and you just want a piece of promotion, that could work too.
That's awesome too. Yeah. A comic can be used as a storyboard, panel for panel. Zack Snyder does it all the time. So, and Sci-Fi Channels is big on adapting comics. So I think that was good that you chose it.
And so that's something that I'm throwing out there, because this can be a very useful tool, or it could just be helping you to tame that learning curve slightly. Or if you're really smart and that, maybe you'll offer this tier again if somebody picks it, and maybe if somebody's super smart and then super crafty, they'll pick up another 5 pages and then build it out that way. And instead, they'll do issue 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they'll figure out a way how to do a 20-page comic for a relatively cheap way, and that's the Jew in me, because I know how to manage money. I can say that because I'm Jewish.
It's fine. We're glad to have you part of a tribe.
So I'm just going to say it that way. So clearly I'm selling here. So that's that tier. And obviously, there's even more going into this, where obviously stretch goals are a thing with this, and there's some cool stuff going on with that, I think, as well.
I'm not big on thinking about, I think about a little bit, but I'm not big on announcing or posting stretch goals until I hit my actual goal. I'm one of these cynical people who just suspect I'm going to get 95% of the way there, and then 50 backers are just going to cancel their pledge all at once. So I like to not count my chickens before they hatch. I'm going to wait to get funded before I start announcing and posting up stretch goals. But yeah, there's tons of things I like to do. I like to offer commentaries and bundles and some prints and stuff like that. So yeah, all good things.
And so obviously there's a bunch of stuff coming out with this. Obviously you're 70% of the way there. There's a bunch of big ticket items. There's a bunch of smaller items. Obviously, you could just go digital. You could go print and physical. Obviously, you could go deluxe digital and theme song, obviously. So there's a whole bunch of tiers that are out there. And obviously, if you back the variant at 20, you're going to get that theme song in there. You're going to get a physical book, and so obviously that's something to keep in mind as well, where for the most part, everything is backlogged, from my understanding.
What do we like to call it?
As you tier up, you get everything in the previous tier.
Yes. There's a word for it. I can't. I'm blanking right now. But
grandfathered in, maybe.
They're stacked. The tiers are stacked in that everything is in one tier is everything the tier before it. But I also offer the theme song as an add-on. So if you get the standard digital or the digital deluxe, you could also add the theme song onto that. So you don't really have to just get the print book in order to get the theme song too, which a lot of people are doing.
And even going further off of that, is if you get a physical book, are you also offering the digital with it? Because
every physical tier comes with the digital deluxe.
And the reason why I ask this is that I'm a comic collector. That's my business. This is what I do. It's how I create cash as aside from my job. And it's a side hustle. And so I back projects and I buy comic books and I don't even read them. I know it's a sin, but when you buy a book for $20 and you sell it for $60, and then you could buy 3 more, it's hard to go open up a book when it's in really good condition and you're making good money on it. So my point is that some people are very much collectors. They want to read the story, but they don't want to open up a $20 variant book, and they want the cover. So obviously that solves that problem.
Yeah, I send the digital version fairly quickly as soon as the campaign is over. I don't wait long. Some people say I just want the physical. I don't like to read the digital, and they'll ignore me, which is perfectly fine. I don't care. You'll get it anyway. So there's that.
And obviously, those are all the rewards, and obviously, people should back it. And I do want to take a step away from the rewards. Obviously, a lot of stuff that people can choose from. And I do want to talk about Kickstarter with you because obviously you've run a few of them now. And I am curious because Kickstarter has changed in the last few years. And it's become a very interesting place in comics. A lot more projects are in Kickstarter now. Partially because of COVID, partially because it's become very lucrative. Also, big names are now in it. A lot more people are into Kickstarter at the moment, especially in comics. More interesting projects have shown up. And so where do you feel Kickstarter is going? Because it has changed. It's evolved. It's become a very different beast than it was 3-4 years ago.
So the big debate going on is whether or not some people even belong on Kickstarter. And there's 2 arguments to this debate. The first argument is everybody belongs on Kickstarter. It doesn't matter if you're movie star Keanu Reeves, who has his own book, who just broke the record for the highest. I don't even know if it's the highest funded project, but certainly the highest funded comic at 1.4 million. So it's a question on whether or not somebody like that even belongs on Kickstarter. And a lot of people are saying absolutely, because he's Keanu Reeves. He's bringing attention to the platform. He's bringing new people there, and it's rising tide raises all ships. So certainly he belongs there. The other argument is that you're drowning out, they're sucking up all the oxygen in the room, and that all the little guy is not getting as much attention. It's not getting as much focus. It's just not getting the little guys aren't going to get recommended if there's just big guys that are there, because at the end of the day, Kickstarter makes money the more money a project raises. So they're going to promote stuff that's eye catching with big names and big IPs and stuff like that. I don't really know where I fall on that tier, simply because
do you also feel, and I don't mean to cut you off, but last year there was like 183 projects on Kickstarter this month. I think there's like 230, And so obviously there's 50 more, 45 more projects. And even let's take out the big guys for a second. If 45 more projects are on Kickstarter and I have a budget of let's say $40, that means that either I back everything digital and I back 6 projects digitally, or I can only back one project despite there being more. Yeah. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to pick a project I think is cool. I'm going to pick a project that has good rewards, has good covers. I'm going to pick a project that seems interesting. And I'm going to pick a project that I believe is also going to be funded, because guess what? As a consumer, when I back a project and I have a daily budget, I manage my money in a certain way where if I back a project, I'm assuming that $20 or $40 is gone. Yeah. I'm assuming that project has to be funded. I cannot afford to back 3 projects and then have all 3 of them fund and not account for it. So, but it's a serious budget issue.
I think you have to look at the data and what the data. The question is it Kickstarter a bubble? Is at some point the bubble of all the comic projects there?
Just because I think that's also an issue in this as well, where the more you could have a big tide come in, but if you have 50 ships instead of 25, that also affects it tremendously, because statistically things are going to fail. They have to. There's no way that if you have more ships coming in and you don't have more people coming in, and that I guess that's the question.
I think that what the data shows right now, at least, is that during the pandemic, even before the pandemic, a lot of categories on Kickstarter were going down. Their fundings were going down. Their projects were going down. Comics was the only category that was going up as far as success rate on projects and total funding on projects. And I don't think that that's because people decided that they just want to spend more money on the platform. Or I shouldn't say, I don't think that's because people just suddenly decided they want to spend more money on comics. They just decided where they want to spend their money. So people are discovering that Kickstarter is not, or I should say indie comics in general, has a little bit of a stereotype of being poor quality. Everyone thinks, or at least 30 years ago, people thought if you were an indie title, it was because you couldn't get one of the big publishers to pick you up. That's not the case anymore. People understand that there's a lot of good books on Kickstarter, and it's a great platform for sales, and that's why you see big names that are jumping on it, because they see the opportunity. So, yeah, I think when you have big names that are launching their books, rather than they put them in the comic shop because it's a different market, but when they put them on Kickstarter first, it's because they see the potential, they see the opportunity, and it gives credence to a lot of other projects that are on there.
Do you feel that I'm going to give you an analogy? So Pandora's box. Do you feel that when Pandora's box technically was open, nobody knew exactly what was going to come out of Pandora's box per se? Because technically, if we look at it, both good and bad came out of Pandora's box. And so what I feel about Kickstarter, and I'm not a Kickstarter creator, but I feel that all these big creators coming in is Pandora's box, where a lot of good might come out of it and a lot of bad is going to come out of it too. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see any of the good and the bad until 2 years out, because I think it's brand new. I think the dust hasn't settled. I think on Berserk, the dust hasn't settled on it. On Nocturna, the dust hasn't settled on it. And we're actually going to see what happens with all of this. And also, I think it gets very complicated because Scott said, I'm creating my own creator brand thing. His first book in his own publishing company or his own line is Nocturna, and you funded it on Kickstarter. It's a little bit weird where you said, I'm going to be an indie guy, and I am writing, and I'm a top player at DC Comics, and I am legitimately building my entire company on the back of Kickstarter. And I get the sale of it, but you can't make statement A and then do statement B and still pretend you're statement A.
I picked up Nocturna, but I didn't get it on Kickstarter. I got it.
I didn't get mine on Kickstarter either. I got it from Midtown.
I got it in my comic shop. and
It's
it
my
was
comic shop. So there you go.
it was yeah. So it's a different marketplace, and I think at the end of the day, the same thing that applied to comic creators and authors in general from the beginning of time is going to be the same now. I shouldn't say the beginning of time. I should say from the internet age till now, which is you are responsible for your own brand, you are responsible for your own customers, and you control your own destiny. So the way we translate that to Kickstarter is don't rely on Kickstarter to get your project successful or funded. Yes, it helps. Certainly helps. They have tons of tools built into Kickstarter to try to help you succeed. But at the end of the day, you are responsible whether you sink or swim. You still got to do the work. So don't worry so much about all these other creators and publishers jumping on Kickstarter, how it's going to affect you. It might help you, it might not help you, but at the end of the day, that's irrelevant because you need to take care of yourself. You need to notify your backers, have your mailing list, have credible social media accounts, speak to fine folks like yourself who do a phenomenal job kind of pushing us and promoting us, and just do the work,
And obviously, we brought up COVID because I think Kickstarter is super complicated, and I am in the camp that the Kickstarter is for everybody, but I also think that we all have to acknowledge that we don't know what it's going to be like in 2 years, and that we opened up a box, and then all those big creators coming on could go one or two ways. It could go many ways, I should say, and we don't know what it's going to look like in 2 years, and I think it's going to be super interesting. But I do want to talk about COVID as well, because obviously COVID has fucked up shit. I think it's a very, very easy statement to say. It's very true. The biggest shit that's been fucked up is San Diego Comic-Con and the entire con world, where 95% of cons haven't operated for a year at this point, and some change. Things are starting to open back up. I just got my first vaccination shot. I'm 28. It took like literally 9 hours of phone calls to make it happen. Very frustrating entity. And also, look at MLB, look at basketball, look at football. I mean, limited fans. Obviously, San Diego isn't happening. Cons aren't happening the way they were. People think we're going to come back in August. I'm a little bit, skeptical of that. And also, COVID has hurt people economically. At the same time, going to a con is a luxury. So where do you think cons are going and what's going to happen with them? And I'm not anti-vax, not anti-con. I want cons to come back, but I do not think that we are in the same capacity levels that we could be at. I don't think it's justifiable to buy a table at the same price it was in 2018 at the moment. And I don't think people have money, per se, to go to a con. And I don't think the attendance is there. And I also think people aren't so ready to jump back into the frying pan so quickly either.
So I'll answer it by giving my con story for 2020. I've done a few cons here and there. It's very difficult for me to do cons based on work schedules and my kids and my wife and all that stuff. 2020, I wanted to change that. So I had a whole bunch of cons lined up. And I did a small one in New Jersey. My second one was in April in Philadelphia, outside of Philly. And of course, April is when everything shut down. So they pushed it back to Labor Day. Wishful thinking. So
got
pushed back again to April. So, and then it was like the weekend or the week before the con was supposed to happen, and an email was sent out that said, obviously we're not having it. And
that's what happened to Awesome Con, is that they were supposed to do it in April, and I was like, fuck no. And luckily for me, what wound up happening is that they canceled first. They pushed it to December, and I was still like, fuck no. Because it was like, I'm not doing a con in December. It makes no sense. This isn't going to get better in December. And also, who in the hell wants to do an anime con or a Comic Con in December? No offense, but it's freaking nobody has money in those months. So everybody's money's going to Christmas, and that's just the way it is. So that's what happened to me. And I'm a panelist, and so that's my concern. When they canceled in December, I'm like, oh, thank God. So I don't want to go.
So
But
what
yeah.
happened was this last time in this April, they pushed it back again. They said obviously it's not happening. They didn't reschedule. They left it open, and they said we have your money. Your table is still reserved. And but the way they booked it is they didn't say it's a new con. They say this is a rescheduling of the original con for 2020, and you're only allowed to cancel up to 6 months before the original cancellation date. So they say nobody can cancel and get their money back. So basically, you're on the hook to table this con whenever it happens. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So I have no plans to
It's
attend
a
con.
little fucked up.
A little bit, but you know what? It's a crazy situation. So I mean, it's not that much skin off my back because it was the only con that happened to for me. I didn't have any other tables booked. I could see if I had 7 cons booked the entire year and they all did that to me, I'd be freaking out. But I still plan on attending this convention whenever it happens.
So what do you think needs to happen though? Because I mean, you've been to other cons, whether as a fan, as a panelist, as a table host, and obviously we can't go the same way that we went in the past.
Yeah, it's kind of that thing when you look back on a lot of things you did, you're like, what was I thinking? When like bowling, I keep seeing this meme about bowling balls. People shove their fingers in bowling balls, not thinking whose fingers were in there before, and then they just start eating stuff without washing their hands. It's like, how are you going to go back to a con that's you're jam packed in a tight space like sardines with a bunch of.
I don't want to go to a con that has. I went to Big Apple Con. I don't know where you're from, but Big Apple Con is sort of around Madison Square Garden. It was super hard to move around in that con. And I was like, holy fucking shit, this is a monster of a con. Everybody's breathing on each other. Nobody's mean or anything, but this is a nightmare.
I've tabled Big Apple Con.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly what I'm talking about. It's in a hotel like conference center. It's not like a warehouse where you need that a lot of people. And I think we need they're going to have to limit capacity. You know, that's step number one, and just enforce distancing and masks and stuff. It's going to be a while.
And it's also going to be a while in California and New York. I mean, that's just the way it's going to be. New York and California are going to be the last two to open up because they've had the most damage. And let's be realistic, San Diego Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con are not going to do 100,000 people ever again. Ever again, because there's too much risk.
Yeah.
And then that creates a whole economic problem because now the revenue generated off of 100,000 people is $10 to $30 million. That's what New York Comic Con generates, estimated. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I think it's a pretty safe assumption. The amount of money that's generated in hotels, in money being spent, in food being spent, in table applications, in actual job creations for the Javits Center. And so obviously I think 30 million is a pretty safe bet on New York Comic Con.
But you got to remember New York City. So I've never been to San Diego, but from what
I didn't say that 30 million was profit. I just said complete sales.
So from what I understand from San Diego is that when San Diego Comic-Con happens, it takes over San Diego. Like it's Comic-Con everywhere. But for New York City, when you do a Comic-Con, you can walk 3 blocks and people wouldn't even know Comic-Con is going on because it's New York City. There's so much happening. So there's like a Comic-Con going on in New York City constantly. So the fact that all these different cons are not happening, the city is taking, I can't even imagine what the hit is going to be.
Yeah, and I think that even just from even just like a travel position, a hotel position, and New York City hosts, I think they host like 30 to 50 cons a year that are on the schedule. So obviously New York City is taking a massive hit more than anything else. And I also think that certain cons aren't going to come back because I just think their financials are just not there. And it's going to be super interesting what happens with all of this. And obviously, I think going forward and waiting for the dust to settle is what's going to happen. It's not going to be the same.
So one of the statistics that the con that I was talking about was citing, They were talking about state mandated limited capacities. So, and they were saying, and I immediately thought of, oh, that's going to hurt attendance. And then they said right after that, that's just not people attending. Those are panelists, people tabling, people working there. So that's everybody. So when you have to make these decisions on whether or not you're going to cut employees to get more attending people there, or cut security. I mean, these are real questions that people have to address.
Are you going to cut staff? Are you going to cut volunteers? Real question. And then here's what happens. You cut security. What happens if there's an issue? What happens if there's 10 issues and now you can't deal with it and you're liable?
Yeah. Do you cut celebrities because but is that going to make less of a draw to the thing? These are enormous calculations that I can't possibly fathom these people have to make.
This is why I don't run a con. This is why I don't want to run a con. It sounds like a miserable job. And you know what it is? I'm a panelist, and if I'm speaking to only 100 people when I usually speak to 300, I don't want to present. And you don't think that I'm not going to go to the con and start demanding stuff, and you don't think that my fellow panelists aren't, and if all of a sudden we're only speaking to 50 when we were speaking to 200 before, big issue. You don't think that I've been loyal to cons and that you fuck me over? It's going to be a bigger problem, and it's going to be messed up. And you know what it is? And also there's going to be a problem where people go to panels at cons because they're sick of spending money every 5 seconds. They don't want to go in. There's a saying. So I weighed my wallet once before I went into a con. And my wallet weighed, I brought $1,000. $1,000 weighs a certain weight limit. I'm not going to tell anybody what it weighs. But it weighs something. If you have 50 20s, it weighs something. Weigh your wallet before you go into a con, and then weigh it when you get out. And you'll see my point, everybody, is that you don't want to be completely where you enter the dealer's room with your wallet weighing like 1.5 pounds and it now weighing 0.1 ounces. You don't want that in your first day. And if there's no panels, that's what's going to happen. And then you spent $90 for a ticket. Who's the sucker now?
Yeah.
So that's how I view everything. But I digress. So obviously there's a lot of stuff going on here. And so obviously I am curious, and I do want to give you a chance to self-promote because we covered a lot of stuff here in the last hour or so. Obviously, where can people find the Kickstarter?
So if you want to be simple, you could go to Kickstarter and search for The Last Homicide. Other than that, this is my handle for pretty much everywhere: Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And I'm pushing it every second of every day. So I'm sure if you go to one of those places, you're bound to run into a link.
And obviously, I've been saying this to everybody. I said it about 1 hour and 20 minutes ago, and I'm going to say it again tonight. You have to support indie. What that means is that you have to back people's independent projects, whether that's Kickstarter, Indiegogo. If they have a store, they have a comic shop, they have a business, they have a GoFundMe, they got a PayPal, they got a Buy Me a Coffee, a Patreon. You should be backing their project. If their books are in an indie comic shop or a regular comic shop, buy their books. Super important. Obviously, Frank has a Kickstarter going on right now. There's about 13 days left. If you have money and you like what you heard in this interview, you should be backing that project because it is super, super important to back independent creators. And it's not charity because it's an equal exchange of goods. And if you're in that circumstance where money's tight, and let's be realistic, COVID has been very tough on a lot of people financially, what you should be doing is following on social media. You should be following people on Twitter, their Instagram, their Facebook pages. You should also be sharing their pages, sharing the Kickstarter, commenting on things, retweet their tweets, like their Instagram. If you know somebody who likes crime comics, definitely share the Kickstarter with people because you never know who might be backing something. I know a bunch of people who like crime comics. So obviously you should be checking that out and supporting them because it is super important to just do that and make sure that if you know somebody who likes a particular genre, send them the link. You never know who's going to back that. and it can be very instrumental. So obviously, just to recap, and not the pen, everybody, but you should be supporting financially and backing Kickstarters and other people's projects. Super important, as well as following on social media. And I'm getting really sick of saying it, and so start doing it, everybody. And I'm gonna stop saying it because I'm getting tired of saying it. I said it 90 plus times last year, and I'm probably gonna say it another 150 times this year. And until everybody starts doing it, I'm gonna keep saying it. And on that note, I'm gonna give you the final word.
I don't know. You covered it all. I don't know what else to say. Yeah. So Frank, thanks for stopping by. I love it. I'm Frank Martin, and at Frank the Writer is my handle for Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. FrankTheWriter.com is my website. If you really want to dive into the weeds of my work, I got free stories and free comics out there. I jump around all different genres. So I write horror, sci-fi, fantasy, crime in this case. So I'm bound to pop up with something that you'll dig.
Yeah, guys, go support Indie.
Thanks for stopping by.